how do we prevent burnout and how do we make sure that we're satisfied as we're doing it? And, there's a larger layer than that. And I think that in the waters we're swimming in the workplaces that we're serving, even if we're an entrepreneur, the culture hundreds of years ago created workplaces, by men, for men. And so we have to have this sort of meta perspective on what are the dynamics affecting me? Because as women, we're a marginalized, population, and there's a lot of nuances that come into play that early in my career, I didn't really realize were happening. I was like, no way, that's not a factor here, except hello, of course it was. And so I think to be a successful woman, we have to be able to have the skills to navigate our internal world
Mm.
and to navigate the external world and the way that that is influencing our trajectory.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Tracy Donegan. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Crystal Frazee. Dr. Frazee, a pioneer in mind-body healing and a go-to women's health and leadership expert with almost 20 years of experience in healthcare, coaching, and organizational development, and also a gentle birth mom. In this episode, we talk about using mind-body practices to reduce burnout, the constant pressure women feel to be perfect, and the good woman narrative. And now I bring you Dr. Crystal Frazee.
Hi, everybody. You are very welcome back to the next episode of the Tracy Donegan podcast. And today I am delighted to welcome Dr. Crystal Frazee, physical therapist and women's leadership coach, to the show. Welcome, Crystal. I'm delighted to have you and excited to hear what all of the wisdom and tips you're going to share with me for my summer and for all of the women out there who are trying to figure out how to back off from burnout. Welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And for the listeners, I'm sort of girl crushing here because I've known Tracy for 10 years at least. And followed her work and such a huge fan of her as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as an innovator in the field of women's health and so much. So I'm so happy to be here talking to you.
And I could say likewise, because I've been following your journey too. Like it's so lovely to see, gentle birth moms who, we are transformed by motherhood, whether we want to believe it or not, and how other women embody those changes. When I'm kind of watching them on Facebook and social media, it's just lovely to see them flourish and just step into motherhood and all of its challenges, but with a few tools in their toolkit as well. I'm delighted to chat to you. So I guess I'd like to ask you about, first of all, I've been listening to your own podcast, and when we're talking about female leadership and successful female leadership, I mean, that means different things to different people. So how are you defining successful women's leadership in today's frantic world?
That's a great question, and one I don't think I've gotten before. I think that as a woman, to be an effective leader, to be a successful leader, which really is individually defined, it requires layers of skill building and knowledge. It requires us to not only have the competencies to perform the job, whatever we're expected to do in our roles, but also to have specific skills in how we maintain our own sustainability within life. How do we prevent burnout and how do we make sure that we're satisfied as we're doing it? And, there's a larger layer than that. And I think that in the waters we're swimming in the workplaces that we're serving, even if we're an entrepreneur, the culture hundreds of years ago created workplaces, by men, for men. And so we have to have this sort of meta perspective on what are the dynamics affecting me? Because as women, we're a marginalized, population, and there's a lot of nuances that come into play that early in my career, I didn't really realize were happening. I was like, no way, that's not a factor here, except hello, Of course it was. And so I think to be a successful woman, we have to be able to have the skills to navigate our internal world
Mm.
and to navigate the external world and the way that that is influencing our trajectory.
It almost feels like the game is kind of stacked against us a little bit because
Yeah.
it's not a level playing field by any sense of the term. So
Right.
yeah, it is. I mean, we're bringing many different layers and sometimes baggage as well to the not to the world to I guess if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in business or however you make a living, we bring that with us. And as you know, for anyone who's a mom, you have an extra layer
Mm.
of
Yeah.
not baggage, but an extra layer of aspects to, I guess, life that is very different to, you know, the dad that gets up in the morning and off he goes to work, and mom is getting the breakfast ready and getting the kids ready for
Yeah.
school. And I know that's stereotype. I know that's not in everybody's household, but that has been the traditional norm for so
Mm-hmm.
long. And I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
in. I know you're a recovering Southerner, but I'm in the South
Yes.
as well. And it's very much it's still quite a
Yes.
traditional lifestyle, and that's just the culture here.
Right.
But
Just
when
to
we look
set the
at so I
stage. Oh, just to set the stage for the listeners real quick, because they may not realize what's happening because despite, all the women in the headlines in moving into new positions, the rise of notoriety for our female athletes, the rise of women in politics, the rise of women CEOs, we have to be clear that actually the numbers are not really progressing. When you actually look at the statistics of the progress of gender in the workplace, you see it, except
Mm.
there's a huge leaking pipeline. And so, it's just to kind of help people along because I still talk to people who are like, really? Gender is still a problem? And I'm like, yes, it is,
Yeah.
So, for every one woman put into a director role to quit, for women of color, the advancement is going literally backwards. Literally backwards. And as far as what progress has been made, it's so minuscule, we cannot celebrate it really. So, just to kind of set the
Oh,
stage of where we're at. And then to speak to what you were talking about as a mom, as a career person, what we're experiencing is what I call the perfection paradox. And it's that social grooming that there's a certain expectation of how you fulfill every role based on your family of origin, the culture that you're from and in, because I'm recovering Southern Belle, you're transplanted too, right? But we're living
yeah.
in a culture that imposes these expectations. We internalize all that and it creates stress, and it dominates and directs our energy and our attention in ways that are not just taking care of ourselves or our families. It's how am I
Hmm.
showing up at work? How am I showing up as a friend, neighbor, daughter, sister, leader, community builder, right? Et cetera, et cetera. And we wake up in the morning and we don't just, like the dad, put on our shoes and go to work. We put on the hats of all of those roles. And for most women, with the expectation to fulfill them at 100%, which is impossible.
That's the rub, isn't it? That we have been trained into that expectation that we can have it all, and this could be a whole podcast episode in itself. We can have it all, but you really can't. You
You
can't have it
can't.
all. You can have
Right.
bits of everything that's going on, and have a level of that's yeah, you're engaged somewhat, but is it does it how does it feel in your body, and do you feel
Mm.
satisfied with those bits, or are there parts of your life that you're longing to, and you feel it, you long to spend more time on this aspect of your business, or you want to spend more time in your community or with family. And I think I was listening to one of your recent podcasts about body wisdom, and how we're
Mhm.
so, I mean, just being a midwife, and with gentle birth, it
Yeah.
was so evident, and it continues to be evident that we are so disconnected from like below the neck. We are
Mm-hmm.
in our heads so much. Would you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that body wisdom and ignoring it, and how we end up then with the situation of we're just burnt out
Mm-hmm.
and just left with a shell of ourselves, really, when we don't listen to that body wisdom.
Yeah. So as as women, right, we're socialized with what I called earlier the perfection paradox. You've been taught how to show up, but equally biologically and physiologically, we have increased capabilities for things like emotional intelligence and intuition, self-awareness. We're just more primed to be more skillful with those types of things. And so there's a lot of sensitivity here. And what ends up happening for most women is that there's this outside in decision making, this outside in filtering of what do I need? What do I want? What should I do? And there's this like referencing of how will the optics of am I fulfilling this role, appropriately, and you move through all the roles, the 20 hats that you're wearing at one time. And it's this outside reflection versus really building from the beginning, from birth. What is my body telling me? Our bodies, I'm super geeky when it comes to this stuff. It's my background and my profession. And it's also been sort of my own trauma recovery. And it's the way that I accessed a gentle birth is to understand that our body is communicating all the time, in every moment, just through sensation. And you don't have to know what it's saying or analyze it and be able to label it, but you just have to notice there is sensation. There's 80% of all the nerves in our body are going from the body to the brain and just delivering information. Only 20% of the nervous system is actually going from the brain out to the body to give a command. And there's so much there to leverage. And I think that what I've experienced in my coaching practice, whether that was women's health as a clinician or women's leadership, is that so many women don't have the skills to just be quiet, to stop for a moment, to say, I'm just curious. What is sensation? What's happening in my body? What's here right now? And our lives are so busy that we tend to distract ourselves from being able to feel that. Or we don't know that we have the skills to really respond and manage what our body is telling us. And so we don't want to hear it. But fundamentally, to have fulfillment, to be happy in your life, we really need to be able to partner with our body, because it is so smart and wise and can direct you in those intuitive, unconscious ways. Oh, that's not for me. Oh, that's not safe. Oh, there's bias and discrimination. There's microaggression. There's, I'm not co-regulating with this person. I'm not feeling safe. Let me move in another direction. Or our thoughts. Our thoughts can be unhelpful and they can create stress, and there's sensation, except people repeat these same thoughts over and over and over again, right? So I guess to summarize, when we can tap into, in the most simple form, what is my body saying in sensation? In the most simple way, what do I think it's telling me? If we kind of put it into two categories, is it safety and connection and creativity and hopefulness? At the other end of the spectrum, is it threat, danger, stress, loss of connection, overwhelm, burnout, right? And kind of in the spectrum, where are we? And then more advanced is, what do I need right now? What do I need in this moment? But that would be using body wisdom, leveraging it for things like career advancement, enjoyment in your motherhood role, personal health and well-being.
Hey there, if you're enjoying this conversation and are passionate about evidence-based care in labour, The best way to support our work is to subscribe and share this episode with other amazing women in your life. Your support is so important to us and helps us reach more mothers with empowering content. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button and spread the love.
I love that answer. And it is so, we've become so disconnected and so, focused on this device that it's almost like we fill up every single moment with some form of distraction. Because sometimes I guess if you haven't had any practice of being with yourself or being with your feelings, and I remember, I think it's actually might be in the Gentle Birth book, where I was talking about this when this experiments was done, where I think it was participants were put in a room with nothing to entertain themselves with, and they had an option. They could just sit there and be alone with their own thoughts, or they could play with this thing that would like give them electric shocks. And I think there was mostly men in this experiment, but what they found was there was a higher percentage of people who would rather give themselves electric shocks than sit and be with their, because we're just so not used to even following a thought, never mind following and noticing how the thought affects us in the body. And I love this, and I've kind of been practicing it myself lately, this idea of the whole body yes. What is it when you're trying to make a decision? And because it comes up so much with, let's say for moms at the moment, induction of labor is just a huge issue, and an induction for no medical reason. And women are being offered early induction, and they're sitting down with like this big long list of pros and the big long list of and it's such a mental game. And it's like, okay, but when you look at this list, or when you think of both experiences, what does it feel like in your body? Because again, as you said, there's so much wisdom there that we're just not tapping into, because we've learned to stay in our head so much. And when it's not something we're even taught in school, that our body has this incredible knowledge. But that idea of when you're making a decision, what would a whole body yes feel like? And also, what would a whole body no feel like? And you don't
Absolutely.
have to, because I love what you were saying is like, we're taking out the, paralysis by analysis, that whole like stuck in our head, and just like, what would that feel like? And I feel it feels exciting. It feels reassuring. And then I think that I think we're combining both. So we can look at the list, but I think ultimately, what does that feel like in your gut? But and again, that communication that's coming from the heart to the mind and the mind down, it's just, it's incredible that we have so much available to us that we're just not accessing.
There's studies that show, like surgeons or medical providers, that there are so many moments that you've not been trained for, right? The patient with multiple complexities and things don't happen as they should in the protocol, and they have to make a air quotes, gut decision. And if they're able to access that, the outcomes are better. Similarly, as a patient, if you have a quote unquote gut feeling about your provider, about whether or not you feel safe and trusting or don't, you're right. And we know how important that relationship is in the birthing suite and the birthing relationship, but in all of our medical care, with our employers, with people in our community. And it really is that gut, it's the heart and the actual abdomen, the heart and the gut, the hut, as I've heard it called before, to really tell you what is happening and to trust that. And I think it comes back to fear of not wanting to make the wrong choice. And so we get stuck in the head that if we can intellectualize it, we'll get the better answer. But actually, when we're in our body, we are just a cluster of receptors. And there's so much actual intelligence. You look at any migrating species in the water, on land, or in air. How do they do that? How do they find the same bush to eat at after migrating across the country? They
Mm.
are using body wisdom. And we are an animal species and we have these same capabilities. And as women, when we can learn that, oh my goodness, because you add the intellect and, the skills that you already bring to the table, and you partner with your body, and you can be unlimited. You can navigate
Yes.
so much.
Yeah, that's how I feel when moms are especially stepping into that transition of parenthood, that if you have been able to connect in with that body wisdom in pregnancy, it's just like it is the icing on the cake, and that really
Right.
can take you so far in through that, that the challenges of postpartum and your identity and everything. It's really being kind of
Right.
tuned into your body, and being okay with this. We're so in our heads when it comes to what other people are thinking of us, and that idea of we're
Mhm.
being judged, and if we can let that
Yeah.
go and be more accepting of, and as you say, it
Yeah.
all comes back into kind of a mindful approach of how can I be more accepting and nurturing of myself. I'm a human being having a human experience here, and
Right.
nobody is ever going to get it 100% right. Ellen Langer has written another mindfulness book recently, and she has a great chapter on decision making. What she talks about is at no point are we ever going to have enough information to make a decision. So her approach is make the decision based on again body wisdom, your and the analytical part of it as well. But she says you can never make the right decision. You have to make the decision right. So
Yes.
for that
Ooh, I
mom
like
who
that.
isn't that? And I thought,
Yes.
and that has been kind of percolating in my brain now for months. I'm like, I want to talk about it, I want to write about it. But when I think of
Yeah.
the moms again who are really unsure about an induction, they feel maybe they're being not coerced even, but they're encouraged to, let's just do this. You've
Mm-hmm.
done your 9 months. That if you do get it to a point where you're thinking, I'm not sure I made the right decision, that in that moment it's okay, well, how can we make the best of this decision, and how can we still
Mm-hmm.
nurture ourselves with this decision
Mm-hmm.
and be okay, but I love the idea of we're never going to have enough information. Really, we could sit down here and talk about the pros and cons of induction till the cows come home.
Mm-hmm.
We have whatever
Right.
decision we make, we want to make the decision right instead of focusing on
Right.
making the right decision. Um,
For
so for women
yourself.
who are listening,
Yeah.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
today, and we do. I mean, we talk about burnout a lot. There's a huge amount of burnout within the medical providers, midwives, and women in general. But for someone that's listening, thinking, I'm feeling a bit stressed, but I don't think I'm burnt out. So what are the
Mm-hmm.
signs of burnout for women? Are they different for men? And what, I guess I'd love some suggestions on how women can learn to really kind of corral their time, have
Mm-hmm.
boundaries, and reduce their chance of getting to that point where they are so overwhelmed and burnt out that it's really affecting their lives.
Yeah. So generally, it's a physiologic response of the body of prolonged, ongoing high levels of stress. And, in our culture, the reality is that stress has a beginning, middle, and end. To um, credit the Nagoski sisters in their book Burnout, they really popularized that idea. Stress has a beginning, middle, and end. And in our culture, because of our phones and the notifications and how we schedule meetings back to back to back, and we're always stretching for more and more and more, and we don't allow a pause, and there's no recovery, and there's no self-reflection, and we're not listening to our bodies, right? Oh, let's just stop and take a breath. the the cycle never ends. It's like we get stress starts as soon as we put our feet on the ground in the morning. It continues. We get into the middle of the cycle and it never closes, right? So the squirrel is my favorite example. It's walking along, smells something, notices the blue sky. Feeling so good. Ooh, there's an acorn, digs a hole, grabs an acorn. Ooh, lovely. Safe, happy, eats a bite. Ah, oh, here's a loud car, stressed, runs to the tree, increased stress, climbs up the tree, lightning fast, stressed, looks around. Oh, I'm safe. Eats the acorn, calm, right? Their nervous system is going through the cycle, beginning, middle, end, beginning, middle, end. We aren't learning how to do that. Not as children, not as adults, not in school, not by our birthing providers. If the stress of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, there's nowhere in our culture where we're really learning it. So it affects men and women the same physiologically. And that's just this like ongoing depletion of all of our systems, increased inflammation. It's a whole cascade. But what you're looking for if you think you're in burnout is prolific exhaustion. You're just tired, bone tired. You go to bed, but you don't wake up rested. You get up and you think, oh, how am I going to do this? And then decreased performance. So, usually your efficiency is dropping. Your productivity is going down. You feel like it takes you longer to do less time. You might make more errors. You're starting to internalize stress because you don't feel like you're meeting expectations, And then there's a demoralization. It's a depersonalization ultimately where you feel like nothing I do really matters. I'm in such a deep hole I can't get out. So you start to think about, I'm going to sell my house and move to a deserted island. I'm going to quit my job and just crochet for a living. Your ideas start to shift because you're just so desperate for a change. You feel really detached from people you love and care about and activities that used to bring you joy. So those are the three kind of hallmark signs of burnout. But for women specifically, as we're moving through this chronic ongoing stress, we can have, a deregulation of our hormone system. And that can cause a whole cascade of additional problems depending on your age. So if you're in childbearing years, now we're disrupting fertility. We're progressing things like endometriosis and fibroids and things like that are going to cause more discomfort during your menstrual cycle and make it harder to conceive. And then if you're older, that disruption is going to further exacerbate any perimenopausal symptoms, which can start as early as your, mid to late 30s. People don't realize that, disrupting sleep, weight gain, memory changes, brain fog, skin changes, acne, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it goes on. And exacerbate and even prolong the phase of menopause for you. So, I mean, stress is the silent killer. It's not good for anybody.
And just back to the metaphor of the squirrel. So what humans do is, so if we were the squirrel, we having a lovely time looking at the sunshine and finding an acorn, and then this car goes by and we stress response, normal response, we flee up the tree. But as humans, what we do is we sit in that tree and we think, the car nearly got me. What would have happened if the car got me? How would my baby squirrels, who would take care of my baby squirrels? And then it becomes this cycle because we're into the automatic thinking of, we extend that stress response for just within our own heads. The event is over, but we're just continuing to almost self-assault ourselves with our mind. And it is interesting when we look at the animal world compared to humans and where we've gotten to in the last kind of couple of years. Like, we do not see the levels of chronic disease that we're seeing in, like, let's just say for the US, the level of chronic disease, we're not seeing that in the animal population. So like, what's going on with them? We're not seeing these levels of obesity and inflammation that we're seeing in the human population as we are, like, compared to animals. Like although our big brains do a lot of great things for us, if we don't know how to manage it and manage our mind, we get stuck in that cycle of stress. And then you mentioned as well about that feeling of not meeting expectations. And then we have to look at, well, okay, we need to be curious about, well, whose expectations am I trying to meet here? And are these realistic expectations, or is this like something that's been culturally imposed, or by my family, or my own ideas about I think you did mention it in one of your podcasts about being a good woman. Like,
The
what
good
is that?
woman
How do we?
narrative. Yeah.
Yeah, would you talk a little bit about that? What is the
Yeah.
good woman narrative? Because I know in my
Mhm.
bones what it is, but I'd love to hear, how you
Yeah.
describe it.
Yeah. And real quick, just back to your comment about the animal species. Not only do they not present as we do, but in humans, women hold 80% of all autoimmune diseases. So, I mean,
Mm,
there sure there could be some biologic drivers there related to the hormone differences with men and women, but ultimately I attribute as a clinician the amount of stress that women are imposed in an oppressive society, and how that stress and not being able to turn off our minds and just really regulate from the body. And I want to put a pin
mm,
in, like, let's come back and talk about regulating in the body, and how that lack of skillfulness not only holds us back in our career advancement, in our ability to be the type of parent we want to be, in
mm.
so many facets of our lives, but it is destructive to our health. So, um, yes. And the good woman narrative is something that I found in myself, right? I mean, even to the point of something simple like this. I'm out for a meal with a mixed genders group, a professional group, and everyone's getting pizza and they want to share a pizza. The restaurant can accommodate gluten-free, dairy-free. They're known for fabulous pizza, right? And I want to be a part of the group. I want to be one of the guys, and I want to be one with the girls. And this is a group of peers I look up to. And so I don't want to cast myself out. Part of me is like, just get pizza. The other part of me, when I'm really in my body, is like, don't get pizza. You're working hard on your health. Get something with more vegetables that's more diversified, that's got the fiber you need, right? That's talking through what I need compared to what collectively I feel I should do in that moment. Even though this is a made up example in the second and it sounds irrelevant what you're going to order for lunch, it is the narrative of outside in thinking. And outside in thinking is, what am I expected to do? What would that person want me to do? How do I avoid criticism, judgment, and not getting an A in the role? When what we really need is inside out feeling, thinking, and decision making without the quote unquote good woman narrative, which is in every role you play, the set of expectations you feel are placed on you. And in some ways, and I learned this through my 30s, place them on ourselves. No one sat me down and said, as an employee, as a rising leader, as an established leader, as a mom, as a business owner, and that's sort of how my career progressed. No one sat me down and said, and in this position, this is what we expect. However, I had a 5-page front and back laundry list of internally what I thought
Mm.
it meant to do that role well. And I'm a high achiever. I want to do it well. Not perfect, but well. And instead of inside out, which is, what do I need in this moment? What's best for me? Independent. Take the cap off of all the narratives and all the, the good woman narrative, and just be in the body and decide from there and, navigate it from there. And so, I encourage people to literally sit down and write out their roles that they play and what ideology they carry that isn't theirs to carry, that they were given by society, to actually write it down. I should be like this. I should be like this. I should be like this. And then to go in and actually sort of rectify it with what is authentic for you, what's related to your values, and what's performative. I call it performative womanhood,
Mm.
because what a waste of energy, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, yes, it is. And it's, yeah, there's so many points there, but um, yeah, the performative, as we were just talking, this morning before we started recording, for me doing this podcast, I'm like, yeah, what shirt will I wear? Do I wear, what lipstick color am I wearing? Like ridiculous stuff that I don't want to think about, but I do feel like
Mhm.
there is an expectation that you're going to look a certain way and sound a certain way. And um again, like nobody told me you have to do these things. And but you do, for you, it's almost like in the ether, and we absorb it as these are things that I should be doing. And of course, that when the word should being, it could with shame on top of it,
Mhm.
because there is
Mm.
that shame involved there. Like I
Yeah.
should be doing better. I should be. And we're again like putting it on ourselves. We're just, absorbing it from our culture. And but again, yeah, nobody sat us down and said, these are the steps you need to follow, and these are the criteria you
Mhm.
need to fulfill. Which means I think we're extra hard on ourselves and trying to be that A student in everything for all of our lives. And the
Right.
idea of failure or not meeting that expectation that we have set for ourselves can be crippling. So
Mhm.
that's why I'm really wanted to pick your brain on this idea of so much burnout in women's lives. And so let's go back to, that regulation in the body. And
Mm.
because one thing
Mhm.
that I'm always banging on about is that emotion regulation is, even before we look at the body, like that emotion regulation is something that we really should be teaching from the
Mhm.
first day in school. Because yes, we've got brilliant mathematicians and fantastic, scientists. But if we cannot regulate our own emotional experience, we're just,
Yeah.
I think for women, especially women in not just women in leadership, but for women ourselves to learn how to regulate our emotions is like a superpower.
Mhm.
It's so helpful in all aspects of our lives. So will you talk to me a little bit about that self-regulation,
Mhm.
regulation of the body, and how that can impact our risk of burnout, or for somebody who's already feeling like, oh, I'm listening to you here and I think this is where I'm
Mhm.
at now. So what
Mhm.
can I be
Yeah.
doing to kind of self-regulate?
Right. Yeah. First, to affirm what you said just a second ago, which is the double binds will always be there. In every role you play, there will always be the double bind, the likability trap, right? That, um, at work, we are stepping into a masculine world where things like uh, authoritativeness, decisiveness, being data driven and, being competitive. That is what we think of as being a good leader, except as women do that in their homes and at work and elsewhere, they're criticized. So there's a double bind in every role we play. So whether you wear, for example, lipstick or whether you don't, someone finds it right and someone finds it wrong. Adele,
Yeah.
whether she's in a big body or a small body, people love her and hate her for that. There's no getting
Mm.
it right. And first, we just have to acknowledge that. And because we're always exposed to this ongoing stress of always not getting it right, no matter what, one, we have to choose connection to ourselves. So for me, when I'm in a store and my child is losing her mind and being very disruptive and yelling and throwing something, I could prioritize, ooh, I'm embarrassed. This is not what's expected of me. And I could do whatever I need to do to get her back in. Or I could prioritize my connection and what I need, which is to regulate with my child and not think about how anybody else feels, right?
Mm.
So if we could just let the goal be, do I feel connected to myself? Do I feel connected to the people I deem important in this moment? That can help us make decisions. And when we can't access that, we need to regulate. And the way most people, I think adults that I interact with, especially in the leadership space, think of regulating is really a cognitive behavioral. It's like a top down affirmations. I'm okay. I'm smart. I can do this. Or being permissive. Oh, they didn't mean that harmful. They didn't mean to overlook me. It's this very sort of thinking about things way of regulating. And there is a place for that. That's fine. But what's way more effective is bottom up regulation, which is allowing our nervous system, very much like the squirrel, to do what it needs to do. Because I promise the squirrel is not talking to itself and narrating itself out of stress. Never, right? It's a biologic unconscious phenomenon that's taking place. It's allowing its body's responses to happen. And for us as humans, we override all of that. And I think that goes back to what we were saying before of why we get stuck in the middle of the stress cycle and why we get distracted. We just don't allow it to happen. And so I think one of the most accessible and easiest ways to get that bottom up regulation, which really all that means is earlier I identified kind of two extremes of sensation, the sensation spectrum from calm, safe, hopeful, creative, peaceful, right? All the way sensation. There's millions of them going across the spectrum to the other end, which is in threat, danger, stress, hopeless, constricted, tense, burnout.
Mm.
Is one would be the breath, right? The breath is always available and just accessing, oh, I can exhale. However it comes out, I can exhale. That can bring you from one end of the spectrum just a little towards the middle. So we're not, again, being performative and saying, well, I have to be over here. And if I'm not all the way on the calm side, I'm not doing it right. No, if you're all the way on the stress side, how do you come out of it just a little bit would be ideal. And one I think is accessible in moments where we really need help in quickly can just be what's called contact grounding. And I've learned that from Liz Stanley. And, it would be like I'm sitting down. So I'm feeling my back in the backrest and my hips held and supported by the chair, and the back of my thighs are held and my feet are on the ground. And to take it a step further to say, I'm safe, I'm supported, I'm being held, not just by the chair, but by the ground, by the earth, by the whole earth. And to soften into that, sink into that, and let myself be held. So let's say I'm in a meeting and someone calls me out and there's conflict and I'm suddenly can't think of a word to say. My stress is like, whoop, I'm activated, flooded, stressed. Or someone comes into, in a medical moment and changes your plan and you have to navigate responding to that. If you can just find a place of contact in your body and just stay there for a moment. And this is what I don't think that most women realize. How we respond, when we respond, is our power. If we just hang out there in the pause, that place between the stimulus and our response, much longer and let it stretch out and not feel like we have to rush and like the expectation is that we're ready, we can wait and let that bottom up processing happen. So in the example of the meeting, when there was conflict and tension, I could stop. I could recognize sensation in my body, like, woo, that's intense. And then I could find contact. I'm sitting in the chair. My feet are on the ground. I could take a breath and just realize, okay, now I'm exhaling. And I can wait for my thoughts to catch up to me, even if it's a 30-second pause. And just to own that. I'm going to wait until I'm ready and then respond, and not feel like the stress upon stress that we have to do it now. So that's an example of bottom up processing, which Tracy is, so gifted at teaching. And I'm sure you've talked about before.
Yeah. But as Tracy walking her talk led, just interesting example from this morning. Yeah. And because I'm such cerebral, that for me the bottom up is a challenge, but I'm recognizing more and more that It really is the way forward because your brain just acts in loops and tries to predict, and because that's what it does, But like for example, I've started walking like early in the morning because Texas, the only time of day you can walk is like 6 a.m. But it's beautiful and it's coolish, and so I'm out this morning and down at my local kind of park area, and I usually have my music playing as I'm getting to the park, and then I turn and take it off just to enjoy the sights and the sounds and really to kind of tune into nature. And I saw like, off in the distance a hot air balloon.
Mm.
So, and immediately, like I'll get the phone out, get a video of the balloon, and then a couple of minutes later, I'm kind of dropping back down again into that awe. Really, I'm trying to find moments of awe during the day, that because I know that's so
Mhm.
good for my nervous system. And then I see like a couple of rabbits running along beside me. Really, like it's like a Disney movie, and I'm look at that. And what do? I take my bloody phone out, and I'm like, and as soon as I took my phone out and took the video picture, whatever, and I put it back in my bag, I could feel the disconnection. I could feel like I had just pushed
Mhm.
the body wisdom aside and all of that really good
Mhm.
stuff. And I was back in my head again. And it was so, so evident for me and such a really good lesson. It's like, okay, the phone can stay in the bag. You can
Mhm.
appreciate because I think being
Mhm.
out in nature, I think any chance you get just to be out there and because when I am able to kind of take a step back and look at kind of the bigger picture, I always come back to Michael Singer's work, The Untethered Soul, and he talks about, taking life a little less seriously. That, we're on this planet like a speck of dust spinning in the universe. We get, probably 80 goes around the sun, and that's it. We're here for a short time. So when you're on your deathbed, will you be thinking about, oh, what lipstick I wore on that podcast? Or will I be thinking about the moment of connection in the
Right.
supermarket with your toddler and
Right.
knowing that it could have been very different. And I think that
Right.
idea of being able to step back
Right.
is so helpful because we're yeah kind of again for women I think we can be very tunnel vision and we don't see outside of
Mhm.
those
Mhm.
lanes really that there is so much more out there available to us if we can
Mhm.
just be curious.
Right. And actually, it's available always. So even in our worst pain, grief, fear, anxiety, stress, in our bodies, we can locate a place that's neutral. Even if it feels nothing, like nothing is between the two poles of sensation. There's intensity and stress, and then there's peace and calm. And in the middle, somewhere, there's this neutral feeling of just okayness.
Mm.
And even right now, if the listeners look around their environment, like what is something that's sort of neutral, you can look at and go, something to, captures your attention, or maybe there's pleasure in that. And for me, light does that. So the light is bouncing off the wall and reflecting in this pretty globe in front of me and over there on a picture frame. And the light looks different over there because it's brighter. And so like Tracy said, finding awe more often, right? Which is what the squirrel does, which is what our bodies are wired to do. And not just to do it, but then to go over a whole breath in and out, like, oh, what's the sensation of that? And
Mm.
that's actually helping our body process cortisol. That alone can mitigate this, you know, load to your system that's driving these autoimmune diseases and chronic pain syndromes and migraines and all the things. So, what we're talking about may sound a little woo or oversimplified, but it's really not, because if you ask yourself, how often are you actually doing that? It's not every
Mm.
day, and it's not more than once a day, probably. So, to seek it out intentionally, even in moments that are challenging, especially in moments that are challenging, locating the sensation in your body can help you find that safety and bottom up regulation. And I also just kind of want to say here that often what I see with the gender challenges that women face is the onus is put on us to develop the skills and fortify ourselves to keep going and be resilient and speak up and make change and be the leader and role model to others. Like, holy hell, that's a lot of pressure and stuff to do, right? And every time we do actually care for our own self and our own body in the moment, we are taking effective action to break the pattern. So step one is like liberating ourselves from the good woman narrative to actually prioritize, oh, that's what I thought I should do, but this is what I'm going to choose because it's who I really am in the moment. And then when we're shored up and we are rested and replenished and feel strong within, then it is important that we use our voice to say out loud, you know, when you speak to me that way, when this dynamic happens at work, when X or Y is going on, it causes me harm. And I need you to know that. And to speak out about the bias and the challenges and the load and the stuff that's put on us that's unfair, but not until we're actually practicing this level of stress resilience inside our own bodies.
Yeah, so true. And important to practice meditation for an hour and then feel like, oh, that was horrific and I didn't enjoy any of that. Find the opportunities, find the moments when it's easy so that we're flexing this muscle of resilience. So in those moments when we are challenged, that we have access to something that we're familiar with, that feeling is familiar in our body and not something that we're trying to bring out the big guns when we don't have the skill really. So, and I think it can be more damaging when we're just, I think baby steps are really what's necessary, especially when we look at the breadth of what's kind of the game being rigged against us, that let's just take our time with this and pause and not rush in to try and, fix it all, and just really kind of bring the attention more to ourselves. But Crystal, what lights you up at the moment in your life?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, my family would be at the very top. I have two amazing little spicy girls that challenge me every day to stay in my body and listen and regulate and show up for them in a way where I can help them do the same, because they both have anxiety and navigating this world isn't going to get easier. And so, I mean, that experiment is very joyful and challenging at the same time. And other than that, I would say really it's my work. It's thinking about the reality that gender equity is not predicted to take place within 7 generations. Now, I don't know more than 3 generations back, so I can't imagine 7 generations forward. It's shocking. And so the thought experiment of, what am I doing in my body, in my home, in my community, and in my work to forward the conversation, to lead a paradigm shift, to help women stay in their bodies? What can we do within my lifetime? What can be done? And having conversations like this, connecting with people who are also curious. Kelly Deals creates a metaphor that there's a huge wall. It's an infinite number of stories tall. It's solid. We're all against it. We all come to the wall with all of our various gifts. Some people are there to entertain. Some people are there to do the physical work to tear the wall down. Some people are there to cook for us and replenish us. And some people are there to teach us how to do it better. And we're all at the wall. Maybe all we have are little spoons, and we're chipping away at the wall. And at the end of the day, my hope is that we've shown up for ourselves and loved ones in a way where we had the spoon and we carved out just a little bit of the wall. So, I mean, this this attuned leadership is really my purpose and my mission, and serving women is really very, very fulfilling for me. And that's my own journey, right? Moving through my own journey into myself and not wanting other women to have to continue with this unconscious struggle that they may not realize they're contending with.
I have to just take a pause there for a minute, because did you say 6 or 7 generations? This is
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
the predictions range from 150 to 250 years, but most of them suggest 250 years.
That's quite a sobering statistic. Yeah, that
Yeah.
really is. Yeah.
It-
I'm gonna have to think about that now, because it's like we I guess we can get, and I personally speaking, I get so laser focused on, what I'm doing and making a difference, and then you wonder, oh gosh, so we're talking about like few generations down the line. But there is
yeah.
so much value in sharing this information, so that,
Yes.
because when we are more regulated, and when we're more curious and more mindful in our own lives, and we share that and pass that to our children, we are making that change so much
Yes.
sooner, I think, because we're going to
Yes.
have the next generation who will bring a different attitude, will be more regulated, not as
We'll have
stressed. So they're,
better genetics. They'll have better
oh, yeah,
genetics. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
less of all of the problems, the health
Right.
problems that we're seeing at the moment, and
Right.
so much less stress. So it is a kind of,
Yeah.
it's, yeah, there's some not so good news, but what we're doing in this moment
Right.
now is making a difference
Right. And
for
here's
those,
here's what keeps me going with that. Growing up, I have amazing women in my life. My mom, grandmothers, aunts, cousins, etc., teachers. However, I wouldn't say that any of them showed me how to do this, showed me how to lead my life by showing up for myself instead of the good woman narrative through their actions. So I think that the change that's right here, that's available to us, and that both of us, Tracy, are passionate and really dedicated to implementing, is that we want to be role models for something different. And I cannot tell you how many times I've thought how my life would be different from early teenage years had I have had a role model showing me this path back then. And so absolutely, like, the charge is for all of us to pick up the baton or the spoon, whichever metaphor we want, and to learn body wisdom, to learn really just to ask yourself, how can your life be different, and what will shift in your choices and your communication, in your presence, in your visibility, in your impact, in your legacy, when you let your body lead in this way, and then choosing to do that.
I love every bit of that. And I guess just there was one thing that you mentioned earlier about when women are struggling and feeling like, oh, I'm just going to quit my job and take a crochet or go live on a desert island. You can do that, but it's, as John Kabat-Zinn says, wherever you go, there you are. If you haven't
Yeah.
learned how to regulate yourself and haven't started to be curious about your thought patterns, and if you're even connected to your body, you'll just take that to the desert island with you. So that one stressor of the job and how and that element of burnout, yeah, that has been eliminated. But you take all of those patterns of thought and behaviors to the desert island with you, and you'll just be just as miserable there. So it's better,
Right.
like, let's do the inner work, and it's not even work; it is moments throughout the day. That is all.
Yeah.
It's just carving out those moments that you're noticing, or a few seconds that you're noticing. Oh, I'm not holding in my belly. I've actually
Right.
relaxed for a minute, and
Right.
okay, so I need to do that more often, because that's tension in my body.
Right. It's freeing. It's work
It
because
really
you're
is.
learning something different. However, it's liberating.
Yeah, it really is. Dr. Crystal Frazee, thank you so much for your time today. This has been really,
Yeah.
really enjoyable. Lovely to
Likewise.
connect
Mhm.
and pick your brain a little bit. And I will tell us where people can find you. And I will, of course, I'll include all of this in the show notes. But yeah, where can people
Yeah.
find you and hire you and tap into all of this brilliant expertise?
Yeah. So I invite anyone who has enjoyed what we've been talking about and wants to learn more to go to my website, which is crystalfrazee.com. The link will be in the show notes. There I have a couple of resources. One is how to run your day without it running you. And that is really helpful for just like, what can I do right now if you're feeling stressed and burnt out, to feel like you have that pause, that moment in your day. And it's very practical and, um, something I think every woman needs in her tool bag. And if feel like you want individual support in how you're navigating your career and life because you want to advance your career and feel more sustainable while you do without compromising satisfaction, then attuned leadership coaching and consulting is what my business is. So I work with individual women and also organizations to come in and do team building, leadership development, and assess and help resolve gender bias. So reach out and I would love to connect.
Thank you. That's been great. And I look forward to talking to you again. I'm sure there's so many more topics that we haven't even touched on today that I am eager to connect with you
Yeah,
again. But thank you for spending your morning with me. It's been great.
absolutely. And Tracy, thank you for being who you are.
Likewise, thank you. I'm getting better at taking compliments. That's another thing that we do really badly. Like we don't
Yes.
let them land. We're kind of deflecting them the minute we hear them. So thank you. I
Yes.
appreciate that. And you.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Remember, empowerment begins with knowledge. If you enjoyed our time together and want more content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. So stay inspired, stay informed, and until next time, take care of yourself.